Okay. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you, Ethan. Thank you so much.
For sure.
Well, then, since thanks to Ethan, now we can record the presentation. I guess we can start, because in case somebody will arrive later, he or she can use the recorded file that we will send you afterwards. So thank you so much again. And I'm going to share the screen and to start the presentation. Okay. I guess you can see the presentation because I see the red frame. I'm just turning in. Okay. So let's start with this third and last tutoring session. Some of the things you're going to see today are part of the Piranesi Prederom presentation, so I don't know where.
I'm sorry, Francesco, I'm sorry.
Yes, please.
Considera, io vedo la presentazione sfarsata.
Ok, allora anche loro. Qua inverti. Adesso vedi bene?
Adesso è perfetta, grazie.
Ok.
Ok, ciao ciao.
Ciao. So some of the slides you will see today actually are part of the Piranesi Prederom presentation that some of you probably already attended before. I don't know where did you took it, or the way you knew about the Piranesi Prederom, but if you follow my presentation or probably Professor Cagliari presentation, some of those slides are already known to you. That is not bad, actually. So let's start with this third happening, and we're going to organize this presentation through a list of 7 main chapters. The first one has to do with truth. What do we mean by truth? By truth is something that is going to be explained analyzing when you are working in an archaeological context, where the main theme is the recognition of the measurements of the distance that exists between what is seen and what is not seen, that is, between the visible ruin and the original absent state. This is mainly the truth. You can see some reconstruction of a temple. In this case, the temple of Antonina Faustino, that is a very simple and possible reconstruction of a building that, since the 17th century, appears like this. This is an engraving from Piranesi. Piranesi depicting this building. We can't call it a temple any longer, because in the 17th century, a church has been settled inside of it. So it's not a temple anymore. It's a temple, is a church settled in a former temple. Where the truth lies now? What is the real truth of this building? Is this building a temple? Is this building a church? What is this? Is this building something from the 3rd century after Christ, or is this building a church from the 17th century? What is the truth of this building? What is the epoch or the moment in which we should consider the original state of this building? This is what we are going to investigate from now on. In the next research we will take here, and usually during the Premio Piranesi, and possibly even afterwards with our collaboration. Here you can see some of the images of the position and the location and the situation of the temple of Antonina Faustina before the great excavation at the beginning of the last century. Here you can see, you can even appreciate the depth of the layers that overimposed on the city, that used to how can I say, used to close the lower level of the temple. In fact, if we move back to the previous view, you can see that the level of the ground is basically higher than what it used to be during the level of the temple, because here you can see that the level of the Roman temple was here, while the level of the church is definitely taller because centuries of dust, ground, and overimposition of layers in the city changed completely the possibility of appreciate this building the way it was in the beginning. Here you can see other building. You can see restored staircases from the past. And here you can see the way this temple appears nowadays. If you go down and visit the Roman Forum during a spring day like those that we are having nowadays. So this is the point we are to start with. The main consideration is about layers and the fact that a building is a living organism, and as all the living organism changes through the centuries in this case, and the final output of these changes is the building we have nowadays. That doesn't mean that the building can't change any longer. What we have to do as the architects, as museographers, is to detect, to define, to understand the different layers and to make them understandable even to other people, and also to create this readability, keeping the unity of the building. In doing that, we have some paradigms. So some examples that drove us through the past and will drive us in the future to try to keep this continuity in a distinguished living building. Here, for example, as you already know, because of the previous presentation, we have the Valadier Spur in the Coliseum, where the reconstruction of the missing part had not only a structural function, but also a museographical one, helping the visitors in detecting and understanding the continuity of the building nowadays. And nowadays, we can't separate the old building from the new restoration and the new part that also suggests, as you can clearly see in this case, where the usual vault used to start from in the past time. Without this reconstruction, this kind of detail wouldn't have been possible. And even a suggestion of some of the decoration that are still abstract, but clearly understandable, as we can see over here. The same thing could be said about this arch, that is the Arch of Titus, that actually from his first position, from the 1st century after Christ, it was moved to be part of the ancient walls of Roman city. After that, the arch, as you can see here, has been moved and located again exactly in the place where it is. And this is what we have now. Here you can see the part of the original arch recomposed and framed inside a complexion of the building that has been produced, keeping some attention to this readability of the layers. In fact, as you probably already know, this is the typology, the paradigm we want to use to understand how to recognize what is new and what is old. Here you can clearly recognize the ancient part from the new part. The right side of this picture is the new part that complete the old one. What is the most amazing thing of this approach? The most amazing thing in this approach is that still keeping differentiations between what is old and what is new, the overall view of the building, the overall image that is conceived to the people is a unique one. You can recognize this organism as one organism, not as the sum of others organisms. And in this case, we can't speak about restoration because the implemented part is so large that it is a complete reconstruction of a large part of the building. Another kind of paradigm that most of the time drove our inputs, our suggestion in when approaching to an historical building is the one from Carlo Scarpa in Castelvecchio. Here you can see the castle facing the Adige River in Verona. Here you can see the old bridge connecting the two rivers, the two the two bank of the Adige River. And here you can appreciate the reconstruction from Carlo Scarpa. I'm not going to take a lecture about Castelvecchio in Carlo Scarpa because it would take so much and is not the case today to do it. But to make you clear what's happened to this castle, that is a castle from the 14th century, the castle has been restored for the first time in the first decade, in the 20th of the last century, with a restoration that was called in style restoration because it used to repropose the style of the current idea of an eventual Venetian style, that is the one you can appreciate in this facade, that is a restored facade, but a restoration that had anything to do with the original facade of the building, because this building, that is a middle-aged building, was built before this kind of style has been adopted in Venetian region. But according to the principle of restoration of those times, that is the 20th of the last century, all the buildings that went under restoration should have used an in-style reconstruction. When Carlo Scarpa was called to intervene in this building, he decided to keep the restoration from the 20th, let's call it a fake restoration, and instead of destroying it and bring back the building to its original appearance, he decided to intervene with a very contemporary project that is the constitution of a new layer, that is the contemporary one. And the effect obtained through this approach is that the intervention from Carlo Scarpa underlines the differences and the critical approach of the previous restoration. So you can clearly see in the next images, for example, probably the clearer idea is that the new windows designed from Carlo Scarpa are in complete contradiction to the fake openings of the restoration of the 20th, just to underline and to emphasize how those kind of restoration are in dissonance. Here you can see other intervention, those three arches, dialogue with an internal window frame and openings that have anything to do in terms of rhythm, in terms of proportion, in terms of everything, materials mostly, and even the nuance of the different colors are different, because the Carlo Scarpa intervention has to do with underlining different layers. That's the way he used to approach the ruin, and the way that made this intervention a masterpiece followed by a lot of people after him. Here you can see how he decided to exhibit the main sculpture of Cangrande della Scala, that was the owner of the castle, designing this incredible contemporary and somehow brutalist pedestal for the statue itself, that being brought in that position, it could have dominated the entire courtyard of the castle, that helped the people to appreciate the dominance of this statue. And even in the inside, we can strongly appreciate the way Carlo Scarpa, still respecting the contact with the old and the new surfaces, still applying his incredible craftsmanship and capability in working with materials, decided to repropose a new layer, dialoguing with the old layer of the castle. And in this incredible picture, incredible photograph, you can appreciate how the interior window frame is completely dissonant compared to the old restoration opening. And even the idea of using some of those panels as something useful for the exhibition of the pieces of the collection of the castle is an idea that still keep the relationship between the background as something that has to be emphasized exactly, at least as the collection in itself. Another paradigm, another example, another reference that is strongly important to us is the project from Rafael Moneo in Mérida. And I'm talking about this big building over here, big bulky building over here. And this is the Roman Archaeological Museum in Mérida, a project from the 80s of the last century, that from the outside seems to be even quite mysterious, because no openings can be seen, you can't face anything inside of it, and is not that clear institution. But the idea that is lying underneath this project is a pretty clear and very, very strong idea. In fact, after the excavation on that area, the archaeologists found a very complex tissue of Roman ruins, of Roman buildings. And they decided to settle over there the new castle, the new museum, sorry. Moneo decided not to follow completely the Roman tissue, but vice versa, to overimpose a brand new frame, a brand new matrix that ruled the space according to a completely new organization. Here it's pretty clear to understand what is the matrix of the new organization, that is very regular, somehow is very orthogonal and very rigid, while the Roman and other kind of layers from the past underneath instead are very disaligned to this. This was important because the strongest idea of Rafael Moneo was to recreate a Roman environment, but keeping clear that the new intervention, despite conceiving a Roman atmosphere, was different, was something new, and not a complexion of the Roman structure. In fact, the interior part of the museum is incredibly Romanish to be understood, because when you are inside this building, you can feel the Romanity of the space, of the architecture. But on the other hand, the fact that this is a completely brand new building, completely contemporary building, is extremely clear. You can't be misguided in that. And if we go down on the lower floor, you can see how the new intervention doesn't fit completely the Roman tissue of the city from the past. Other images of this incredible building. Here it is. Some enlargements, and in this main picture can be easily understood what is a ruin and what is the brand new building, despite keeping a Roman atmosphere with a contemporary building. That is a very subtle feeling. This is a very subtle threshold that requires a great sensibility. That is that sensibility that hopefully we're going to develop through our journey together in the Piranesi Pre-Rome, and if you want, even through the master course. Another paradigm that we always keep in mind is the one consisting in the reconstruction of the Roman theater in Sagunto, a small city close to Valencia in Spain, where a Roman theater used to be there. And apart from a reconstruction, not a reconstruction, a sort of restoration during the 18th century, 19th century, sorry, has been restored by Giorgio Grassi with a project from 1985. Basically here, the project, starting from the sediments of the ruins, consists in the extrusion of the ancient traces in a new building. The reason of this intervention, that is insisting exactly in the same place where the Roman theater used to be, was to give the people the possibility of experience the feeling of a original Roman theater in nowadays situation. So a brand new building giving to the visitors the possibility of experience how a Roman theater used to appear without reconstructing exactly a Roman theater in his defined solution, but only through a typological reconstruction. So the dimension, the proportion, the relationship between the different parts of the original complex are reproduced, but without any possibility left to the decoration, to any kind of replication of the material, only through meshes and composition. This is an image showing the building without the covering, and even showing the one of the elevation of the building. Here you can see the building site before the completion, so before the putting of the roof in the scenery building. And this is the final effect of the building. And here you can see pretty clearly in the section all the typological part built up again, and mainly the fact that the scenery building was exactly tall as the Summa Cavea level of the theater, of the so-called cavea. Here, when you enter this building, you can completely understand how this complex used to work, and you can feel the volumetric experience that a Roman visitor would have experienced in that period. Here you can see other pictures from the place. this could be meant as a museographical intervention, but at the end of the day, this museographical reconstruction gave back the possibility of use the theater for its original function, that is, being a theater. So this museum is used very intensively as a theater and hosts a very important season every year during summer for the people of the surrounding. So the people can go there and appreciate some performances. This is the only part that give the chance to a decoration, but in this case, the decoration is being done through an anastylosis principle, reusing parts of the ruins found in the site to give back the partition of the three orders of the scenery building. And those part of columns and part of orders are exactly original, apart from the elements that are clearly filling the voids missing. Other picture of this building that, as I told you, basically has been conceived as a museum. Here you can even appreciate the way Giorgio Grassi didn't want to suggest any kind of finishing of the original finishing of the building, keeping the relationship between the ruin and the new reconstruction overimposed. Some detailing of the valvas, the original valvas. And that brings all of us to the topic of reversibility. Reversibility is that concept that has to do with the reconstruction, the possibility of completely remove an intervention, bringing back the site exactly to the state it was before my intervention. Let us talk about this small temple on the Acropolis of Athens. This is the so-called temple of Athena Nike. And on the left side, you can see the temple erected. On the right side, the temple removed for restoration. In fact, in this case, the temple has been completely dismantled, moved to the laboratories, restored and implemented, and then built back in its original site. This is the frontal view. This is the side view. This is very clear, somehow even more striking. The presence or the absence of the temple changed a lot. But you have to understand somehow, hope you will get the tone of my assertion, as a big Lego building. So something that can be mantled and dismantled many times in the same place, mainly because the Greek buildings usen't have to use the mortar through the different blocks. So the dismantle and reassembling of the building was absolutely clear. That should make us ask again about layers, first of all, and also the truth. In fact, still being in the Acropolis of Athens, here you can have a view of how the Acropolis of Athens used to appear in the 16th century. The main building with the 8 columns in the front can easily be recognized as the Parthenon. The Parthenon is a temple, as you all know, from the 5th century before Christ. But through the centuries, other buildings has been settled in this area. You can see in the first row a private house with a garden with even a pond over there, and some trees where a woman is picking down some fruits, and the two guys are dialoguing or even arguing over there. And on the right side, a man moving away on a on the back of donkey or something. And even more, even a building inside the Parthenon that was an old mosque settled over there that substituted an even former church inside the Parthenon. So even the Parthenon underwent a lot of changings through the different centuries. Luckily, we still can we had the chance to recognize the original elevation and plan of the Parthenon that in the beginning of the last century used to appear this way, almost a naked one, a building with that was missing the cell, the pronaos, obviously the roof. Lots of parts were missing in the Parthenon. That somehow is even an amazing view or something very romantic to be seen, but on the other hand, take away the possibility from you to understand how the building used to be. So from the second half of the last century on, they started a process of reconstruction of the Parthenon after cleaning from all the superstructure that have been overimposed through the centuries to bring back the original layer, the original view of the Acropolis of Athens. Here you can see some picture from 30, 40 years ago, maybe even more, where the process of rebuilding of the Parthenon already started. This is a view of the building from the Propylaea. And in this case, the reversibility, despite not fought from the start, is still possible, because reassembling all the parts that are spread all over the territory around the Parthenon, implementing the missing part, you can reobtain back your Parthenon. But let's move to a project of contemporary time. The next one is a project from Carillo de Gracia. Again, a project that probably you already saw and you already know, so I'm going to be very brief. This project is from 2010 in Portugal, exactly in Lisbon, in the castle of São Jorge, where João Luís Carillo de Gracia was asked to restore this archaeological area that at those time was basically what you can see in this picture. So an abandoned one, not accessible, and mainly not even understandable. So this is what you would have seen what if you would have visited the site until 20 years ago. So to bring back to life this area, a project was fought, a competition actually, that was won by Carillo de Gracia. And Carillo started, obviously, first of all, with the recognition and recognizability of the ruins to understand exactly what was existing over there. We used to have mainly layers from a couple of eras. One is some ruins from the Bronze Age, and the other main layer, was the recomposition of a couple of Islamic buildings, Islamic houses, courtyard Islamic houses in this area. This is the Bronze Age ruin, and this is the Islamic houses area. The project basically consists in this one. So make the Islamic houses understandable and readable, and cover the Bronze Age part. Actually, the project is not that different from what you can see in this very brief and raw model, because as you can see, the Bronze Age ruins were covered with these rusty metallic slabs, while the Islamic Age houses has been somehow re-extruded on the ruins, exactly on the same place of the ruins. That helped the people a lot to understand back the real volumetric presences in the area, and also give the possibility of having spaces for exhibiting some collection on the site. This going along even with the chance of giving back accessibility to the area, cleaning the pavement and recomposing through this process of rammed earth. The first things that Carrillo did was to redefine the holy precinct, the holy boundaries of the area with these element still in Corten steel that define what is inside and what is outside the archaeological area, and accompanying the people in going down through this process of entering the ground, like any archaeological area should, that define exactly the limit of this museographical intervention. Here you can see some views from the interior part. You can see the steps managing the difference of height through the two levels. And here you can see the tail, very intelligently organized, showing you how this intervention works in managing the two different layers, the visitor layer and the archaeological level. In this case, differently from the project of Giorgio Grassi insisting on the castle of Sagunto, you can see how the building is completely removable. In fact, this metallic structure, completely covered with plaster panels for the exteriors, obviously, is the only building architecture, is the only structure that you can have. And this structure, being so light and so flexible, insists only on 6 pillars that are located in those places that can be checked to be archaeological risk-free. So basically, if in 10 years we decide to remove the intervention, we dismantle this building, we extract the 6 pillars from the way they are located, from the place they are located in, and then you can reobtain the site exactly as it was before the intervention, with a very light, very easy to be mantled and dismantled system that allowed you to produce a new architecture that made the site understandable, because actually this was the building site, but this is the final effect of the building. Now you can understand the typology, the courtyard Islamic house. You can have some shadows over there to get a little bit of rest. And you can also have spaces for exhibition and so on. And to emphasize this idea of reversibility of a museographical intervention, Carrillo da Gracia decided even to let the building to float over the ruins, not touching them completely. If you look at the building, and you can see that at the base, there is a little gap between the ruin and the building itself. That makes the building like floating, like being ghostly moving over the ruins. And this emphasizes this idea of reversibility. And in the night is even more evident through a game of light applied to the building. Now, the next chapter is about independent structure. When we talk independent structure, I guess that this project can help us a lot in understanding what we mean. This is a project from the musealization of Pilota Palace in Parma, Italy, from Guido Canali, an intervention that underwent different moment of realization, as you can see, whose part of this has been closed to the visit in the last 10 years. And here you can see the Pilota of Parma that actually is called Palazzo Farnese, the building that hosts this intervention. The project from Guido Canali decided to put the new entrance to the museum from this main theater, this main hall with this reconstructed theater inside in wood, so the people can enter through here. And what we call, as the title of the chapter already told you, an independent structure lives inside the main building, the main historical building. So the museum is an independent structure inserted inside the main building. Here you can see how this independent structure that is independent not only from the structural point of view, but mainly from the formal point of view, from the image point of view. So you can strongly recognize what is the new intervention from the quality of the historical architecture. And this independent structure is the one that allowed us to host the paintings and all the pieces of art exhibited in this museum. This room in particular is an amazing one. You can see how powerful this image is with all those panels hosting incredible paintings hanging from the roof, from the artificial roof. But this independence can be seen even in other rooms that lives with different formal approach, but keeping this idea of a new parasite living inside the main building all around it. Here you can see some other possibility. If you have the chance to go and visit it, I strongly suggest you to go. It's in Parma. It's very beautiful place to be seen and to be visited. And keeping somehow the same approach, Guido Canali intervened also in the musealization of Santa Maria della Scala in Siena, another incredible city in the center of Italy. Here we have this building that used to host the hospital of Siena, the former hospital of Siena, since the 15th century. And inside this abandoned building, because obviously the new technologies requires different architecture to host a contemporary hospital. Sorry. Here we can see the entrance of the building and the development of the building in lower layer in the hill. In front of the entrance of the building, we have the dome of Siena. And this is the very complex plan of the archaeological remains underneath the ground. It is clear because it's in the bottom part of the view. When Guido Canali, for his project, entered the building, that's what he found. He found ruins, he found rubbish, and mainly he found lots of skulls and bones, because usually the corpse of the dead people were left in the lower level of the building as a sort of cistern for death. So when they entered the place, that's what they found. You can clearly recognize some part of the legs of people, some part of the whip of the people, and so on. The new building or the new interventions, again from Guido Canali, basically is again an independent structure that lives on its own way, always comparing to the all-around structure, all around the envelope that is composed by the historical building. So the new intervention is something that is hosted by the original building, the historical building. And basically, the idea was to create a new pathway that was the covering of all the system that would have run underneath it. Here you can see part of it. Here you can see a worker still working over there. And here you can see how this intervention finally appears. Here underneath all the system running on, then covered by the new pathway. And you can clearly understand what I mean when I say independent structure compared to this kind of approach. Here you have the views of the interior part of this museum, the showcases, and the new pavement covering all the way through and hosting all the elements of the collection. Some images again. The craftsmanship from Guido Canali is a masterpiece of museographic design. And even from the structural part, there's a lot that could be said, but I don't want to bore you too much. Let's move to the 5th chapter of those approach, and then we're going to have a last part that is more about tools. This chapter has to do with continuity and discontinuity. This is an intervention from Aman Canovas Maruri in Murcia, in Spain. The building is a building just beside the cathedral, of the main church of the town, where just beside it they found some archaeological findings. So they decided to cover it with a new museum, a new cover that should have turned the place into a museum. And Aman Canovas Maruri decided to build over the ruins a new urban showcase that invite the people to enter, but that used to hide the findings from the view from outside. Here you can see the building that in this case adopted the idea of discontinuity from the formal point of view with both the cathedral and the ruins underneath, while inside the cover, inside this great showcase, the quality of the space is completely dissonant from what you expect to experience. Here you can see the space inside, and you can see how strong the discontinuity is emphasized between the new intervention compared to the findings of the ruins underneath. Another intervention following this similar approach is the musealization of the Arabesque bath of Baza, still in Spain. Here the project was to musealize those Arab baths under here and to cover them, to protect them from the atmospheric agents. So they again decided to create an envelope covering and protecting the Islamic bath and somehow even hide it. And once you entered the building, you would have found this kind of solution. So the new roof, creating this ceiling, letting the light touching the old ceiling of the bathhouse, and creating this atmospheric view of the site, very fascinating and somehow even romantic. Here are some views of the intervention. And again, even in this case, there's a strong discontinuity between the new intervention and the old one. The old intervention is basically virgin, is almost untouched. The old ruins is still there, completely untouched by the new intervention that just cover it. Is really, again, a kind of an envelope. Here you can see how the volumetric aspect of the area is basically the original one, apart from some glass element to close some holes or some uneven pavement that could have been risky. But another way to work with protection is the monumentalization of the protection, the monumentalization of the showcases. In this case, we can definitely use as a reference a project that I guess all of you already know, that is the Columba Art Museum in Cologne, in Germany, from Peter Zumthor. Oh, sorry. Here you can see the plans and the elevation of the building. The new intervention is pretty clear because this intervention completely overimposed the level of the ruins. The ruins here were very, very complex because hosting lots of different layers insisting over there. There were a Paleo-Christian church, a Gothic cathedral, and even a little church from the 70s inside it to be kept. So the new great envelope, the great monumentalization of the new envelope, goes completely independent from the ruin, apart from following some of the elements still existing there, incorporating, encapsulating, for example, in this case, the Gothic ruins of one of the layers, while inside you can appreciate the entirety of the space because the new envelope is suspended on those slim and tall pillars in concrete. The quality of the interior space, trust me, it's unbelievable. And all around, you still have this monumental envelope that keep everything outside together in a very strong and powerful intervention on these ruins. Another monumentalized intervention is the Bougon Burial Mounds Museum from Studio Milou, completed in 2000. Here you can see the area that is a quite bucolic area where some ruins from a burial mounds area and buildings that needed to be protected were completely covered by a new showcase, a new very sleek and contemporary showcase, a real showcase because it's completely glassed. And here you can see how the new intervention affect the surrounding and the way these buildings are covered by the new element. This is the design of the area. The last church has been kept open and still in use. Here you can see better. And inside this big showcase, you don't look something, you don't look the collection from outside. So the collection isn't a showcase and you stay outside. You enter the showcase and you live within the collection, within the building that are kept inside. Another great possibility to intervene in archaeological area is the one that include working with landscape. Let me show you the musealization of the Roman theater in Clunia, in Spain, from Lab Pap in Valladolid. This was the theater, the Roman theater over there, as you can see from this picture, mainly something difficult to perceivable, difficult understandable for its own position. It was always, it almost looked like a very peculiar geologic subtraction more than not a real theater. And after the intervention of LabPAP, this is the final output of the building. Here you can see we still have a building, but this building is more a landscape work of art, creating a sort of a garden that is again a theater, so a building, but most of all designed through the manage of the territory, of the landscape. So a kind of an inclined garden that can be experienced, but also used as a theater, emphasizing and valorizing the ruin still there, maybe some of them also reinforced, and all the rest are very light and subtle and very small and light elements to redefine the building, its connection with nature and its connection with the overall landscape. You can see how beautiful the view is from here. All the elements seems to be strongly reversible. And even the intervention looks to be put it there like a sort of blocks superimposed one on the other, like the Greek architecture I showed you in the Acropolis. Is definitely very evident how strong the connection with nature here is, and also the use of those cages, of metal cages with big stones inside, wants to evoke an idea of reversibility, of something that has a temporary life in this intervention, despite possibly this intervention can last for a long time. Another intervention that follows this kind of approach is the musealization of the archaeological area of Cantacó, close to Barcelona in Spain. Here, Tony Gironès found this area where a Roman villa used to exist. As you can see, before his intervention, the Roman villa was almost unrecognized, not almost, was completely unrecognizable. His intervention is just an intervention that modeled the ground, basically, and that he did it with the lightest and less volumetric intervention. In fact, this is what he found when he arrived, and this is the final effect. In this way, he not only redefined the different pavements of the different areas of this Roman villa, but it also gave back to the visitors the possibility of understanding that this was the sediment, the settlement of an archaeological site. Everything, again, was built using this very cheap and precast technology. That is the usage of cage to keep stones inside. This way, everything, honestly, is completely reversible, because you just need to take the stone away and then you can dismantle the metallic structure, and the situation is brought back to its original view in the beginning. The effect is very ephemeral, as you can see from these images, despite very present somehow. And here you can see the level again reinforced and then redefined by the view. And this is what you would see if you visit this area from a human view, a human eye. This is the only volumetrical suggestion from the designer, just to give you the hint of how tall this building could have been. And these are other picture of the intervention. That is basically an intervention that has to do with the redefinition of the grounds, of the levels. A very intense, somehow even poetic attitude, keeping an archaeological area in its own aspect, and involving its continuity with the surrounding. Again, the aerial view. And a great pros of this intervention was that its cost was 69 euros per square meters. That is basically nothing. The entire intervention consisted into 163,000 euros. That is a very, very, very cheap expense for such an intervention. So now I showed you the 7 possible approaches you can have to working in the archaeological area. But now let me suggest you some tools. How can you draw at Piranesi Award? What are you supposed to do when you are going to be there? Which kind of tools you can use? I'm going to give you this indication, but then I'm going to tell you about it better. The Piranesi Prix de Rome is generally designed according to the academic tradition of which the prize is the custodian, using freehand and manual drawing in general, also in color, on the model of the French pensionnaire. So redesigning things by hand, if you are able to do. If you instead are more skilled with digital design, you can use digital vector design, measurable with views essentially in orthogonal projection. The drawings can be by line, black on white or negative, with possible half-tone backgrounds and shadows. So when you go to design something, you do need to design them through a vectorial drawing, because everything still needs to be measured, not something that is designed without keeping in consideration the real dimension of the site. Then you can use photo inserts to be composed in an artistic sense. That somehow is a technique that all of you is used to produce. And if we go to move with 3D models, we strongly suggest not to use too photorealistic effect, because the photorealistic effect are honestly difficult to be reached and is not what we look for. We look for an artistic representation of your projects. The renderings need to be involved with the natural landscape, because we want to keep this idea of continuity. The use of Photoshop is not recommended so during the design process. It can be used in vice versa in the final output to decor the final slides. Here you can see some of the possibility. This is an engraving from the German archaeologist in Pergamon, in Turkey. This kind of outputs would be strongly admired and appreciated. I understand that this is quite difficult to be done, but actually you can obtain this kind of effect even designing them through AutoCAD. This is the same site, but drawn in plan. Here you can appreciate again the quality of black lines and all its tones and all degrees, the 50 degrees of gray, as someone would say, 50 shades of gray, someone would say. That is very expressive, very comprehensible, and very architectonic somehow. A closer view, in this case with also the indication of the orientation. And this is some closer view. Obviously, all those drawings has been produced by hand, but if you define them properly, you can clearly understand how you can do them even through AutoCAD. Some elevation. Here you can even appreciate the intensity of the shadows, and so the depth of the buildings, it's very clear and very expressive somehow. This is a plan, other plan with details, and again, other details. I guess you are not going to design something like this. Don't worry, we don't expect you to produce such drawings in such a short time. But for example, if you look at these drawings that use exactly the same technique, those are drawings from the beginning of the 2000 years. Those are some plans drawn by Enric Miralles in 2000, maybe 1999, but you can clearly understand the quality of the drawings. That is something we really love to. You can see the plan on the right, and on the left, all the sections of the different level. And this is the design of the first project for the Edinburgh. I don't remember the name of the building. The Parliament of the Scottish Parliament in Edinburgh. On the right, using the same approach, Enric Miralles also designed his own alphabet and even the number. And this is a thesis that has been designed in 2002. Yeah, 2002, 2003. I don't remember exactly the year. So more than 20 years ago, using exactly the same approach, but through AutoCAD. So if 23 years ago we could have drawn something like this, I guess we can even do nowadays. This is a thesis project from Giulia Ciglione. Here you can see how the technique is exactly the same, but using AutoCAD. The drawings are perfect, the depths are understandable because of the shadow. We don't mess too much with all those colors that, if not used in a very proper way, could misguide the reader. And here you can see another thesis from 25 years ago, a thesis insisting in the Roman Forum. When you come to Primo Piranesi, we strongly suggest you to start working using your own sketch, like this one, that helps you in a very fast and comparable way in producing the project. Going on the site, trying to analyze, control if what you are wondering can be applied on the site straight through drawing by hand is a very important and great tool. Obviously, to do that, you are supposed to are able in freehand drawing, but you are not able if you don't train on it. And those easy and recognizable and understandable sketches helps you a lot in producing a proper project on the site, because you have continuously the possibility of checking the correctness of your project. Then those sketches can be turned into matrix, into other consideration to produce a final output with the project that starts to take life. And then this is what can be produced. This is another project on the Acropolis of Athens. The previous one was the transversal section. This is the longitudinal section of the project. And again, black on white, strong shadows that help us in understanding the depth. And the project is clearly comprehensible. Exactly the way the pensionaire of Prix-de-Rome used to do, going on the site, designing the survey on the higher level, and then proposing a project on the lower level. In that case, they produce real paintings, real good quality drawings over there that honestly we don't expect you to produce. You don't have the time and probably not even the skills. But this is what they used to do. And this is a project that has been produced during the Premio Piranesi in 2003, so 23 years ago. Students like you attending the Premio Piranesi 23 years ago and producing such a drawing. Everything is vectorial, everything is measurable, and then they used Photoshop in the end to apply some colors. But basically, the main project, the main drawing is black and white in shades of gray. And then at the end, they applied the materials on Photoshop in the end. But actually, 23 years ago, now the technology is improved a lot. Actually, this was a very good group of students, but why can't you do that? Also, because all the drawings we can have from other examples are similar. On the left, we have the drawings of the castle of Sagunto, where the recomposition of the theater from Giorgio Grassi has been done. On the right, the German drawers, topographer, redesigning the Museum Highland in Berlin. On the left, there are the drawings of the castle of Sagunto with the connected photograph on the right. These drawings is being done by the office of Giorgio Grassi by hand. And those ones are renders from 2004 for a project that has been designed by the group of Professor Cagliari on the island of Mozia. And the renders that are produced by Filippo Fantini 22 years ago are exactly what we would like you to do. So the renders are basically a model, are renders of a model without peculiar textures, without any will of being too photorealistic, but with the goal of being completely understandable and fascinating. Don't worry about all of that because you will be guided by your tutors in the way to produce your final outputs. But this is what we ask you to do. Again, those renders are from 22 years ago. Now a world move on, and now the technology permits you to do a lot more than that. For example, those are projects from the Premio Piranesi with photo insertion. This is a project, I guess, from 2014. This is the external view. On the eye part, the internal view towards the olive tree field. And underneath, we have the section. Another photo insertion of the project straight on the ruins. And this is the poetic interpretation of a project we proposed on the Acropolis of Athens, where the people can enter the surface of the Holy Rock through this romantic pathway. You can see here the narrowing of the section on this part. Then after that, open up to a larger museum area like this one, where the people can appreciate the substructure of the Parthenon, and where some photo insertion of elements from famous paintings gives back the atmosphere that we would like to obtain. If you assisted to our Premio Piranesi presentation, this is one of the projects we usually show the students to tell them which kind of outputs we would love you to produce. This is a project from 2021, so nothing that far from now. The technology helps us a lot in understanding how your project can work. If you remember the project I showed you about Carrillo da Gracia, you can clearly understand where this project comes from and this detail comes from, showing the technology, keeping the building working. And this is an internal view of the area that has been produced at the end of the designing process. Other internal view of some project from, in this case, 2023. Same project, but in an external area. And the last one, that is this main room with all these statues fought just beside the Cento Camerelle site. Well, after 190 slides, we finished our tutoring for today. Are there any questions now? You are absolutely free to ask me whatever you want to, and I'll try to help you. So let me know if there are things that you want to know. And so we can solve any kind of doubts. Was I that clear that nobody have to ask anything? You strike
Professor,
me.
I do have a question, if it is possible for me to
Absolutely it is. Please, Guram.
Dear Professor, since we have a chance to draw there, is it possible for us to get the materials there, like in Tivoli? We need like I don't want to bring my stuff from my country, so is it possible to go there and get materials there for a presentation and for drawings?
So which material do you mean? I mean,
Like, for example, papers and the pencils and the different colors and like everything.
Yeah. I mean, I never bought over there, but yeah, Tivoli is a quite large city with everything you need. So you will find fine arts shops. And being honest, there are incredible fine arts shops in Rome with amazing things to be bought over there. I don't know if you can move easily to Rome, but if you have the time and the chance, I can suggest you in particular one very, very nice in Rome. But even in Tivoli, you can find places where you can buy pencils, papers, and so on, and sketchbook and whatever you need. Obviously, probably most of the groups will produce everything in the digital way, but sometimes, very often actually, they scan the sketches and they reproduce them in the final slideshow.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You are more than welcome, Guram. Other question? So, probably you are tired after 1.5 hours of me speaking about all these things. I would say, if you don't have any other question, that we can say hello and I hope we're gonna check each other soon for other kind of appointments. In the meanwhile, be confident that thanks to Ethan James, we had the chance of record this tutoring, so you will be given the link to download it soon. So if you need to check back some things, you can do it. And in case you will have other possible questions, don't hesitate to send any kind of request to premio.piranesi@gmail.com. And don't worry, because you will receive answers. Okay? So, if you don't have other questions running on, I would say thank you so much for the attention and a big hug to everybody and see you soon.
Goodbye, Professor.
Bye bye.